Welcome everyone. This is another Zoom meeting on I was going to say a Three Norries podcast, but Two Norries podcast. Tonight, myself and James are going to just talk about how we're getting on over this lockdown, and what's been happening in our lives in regards to um, the podcast and everything else, all the changes that has happened since the podcast has began. The different people that have been getting help, the different services that have been connected to me and James for different things, and we're just going to waffle on about different things here for the next half an hour, 45 minutes, because at the moment we have a few podcasts going. Every podcast is relevant, but we don't want to be doing Zoom meetings every single week because we think this podcast needs to be inside in the studio where we have guests and they're talking about their stories, because a lot of the stories are very intimate and emotional, and we think it's very important for us to be there with the guests to be able to have a chat to them properly and connect to them as well emotionally. So from here on, I'm going to introduce you to James. James is going to just talk about a little bit about how he's getting on at the moment. There's been some massive changes in his life. So I'm going to pass you right over to James.
Thanks a million, Timmy. And just before we get kicking in, I just wanted to say thanks to Susan and Connor for doing the Zoom podcast over the last 2 weeks. It's not easy to do it on Zoom. As Timmy was talking about there, it's better to do it in person because it's very intimate stuff and personal stuff. And when you're in a room with people, you get the energy, and it's a lot easier. So to do it on Zoom with the issues around connectivity and you're up in your head about sound and stuff, it's not easy. So well done to them. They were very well received. Susan's going to come on herself actually in a few weeks with her husband. So that'll be a very interesting podcast. He's been with her through thick and thin, through the addiction and recovery. Now they're married, so I look forward to that. Um, and another thing is, a lot of the people that watch the podcast on YouTube, most of you don't subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world to us if you subscribe to the channel, because if we can grow the subscription, it just really helps us. Also, if you want to support us through the Patreon, you can. The link will be in the description here. Some people give €1 a month, some people give €10 a month, some people give 20. Um, and it just helps us cover costs. For example, now we use Adobe Creative Cloud for the editing and the sound, and the subscription is due. It's about a couple of €100, and that's kind of what the costs that come up. We're on the market for a new camera as well. We have 3 good cameras and one shitty one. So yeah, we've a few quid put away there now. So we're going to horse into the new podcast next week, because restrictions are lifted on Tuesday the 1st, and it's now Sunday the 29th. So for me at the moment, there's been big changes in my life. We fostered a baby boy at 5 weeks old. He's now 7 weeks old, and he's small but unwell in hospital at the moment. So myself and Gillian are. It's like, it reminds me of working in social care again, shift work, sitting around long days and long nights. So, but it's not serious or anything. They're just monitoring him. Also, we don't have any kids. We've 2 dogs, so it's big changes in our life. So I've 2 bags under my eyes. So if there's any listeners there that's good babysitters, make sure to put yourself forward. And at the same time, then I'm working from home. I'm studying. I'm doing my PhD, and yeah, I'm just so busy now at the moment, and I feel like I probably um, burning the candle at both ends really, and I'm just gonna have to really plan out my schedule, my time, and look after my recovery, because I do feel a little bit of pressure, to get everything done. I'm juggling all the balls, and I've only so much bandwidth. I can only, I'm not good at multitasking, so I've a load of things on the go at the moment, and I feel a little bit stressed and all these things. So I'll be very happy for the gyms to reopen as well on Tuesday, just to have that. That's a big de-stressor for me, to be able to go to the gym and lift some weights and run on the treadmill and just do something intense. So There's
Yeah.
that.
How does somebody go from, living with two dogs and their wife having a baby kind of coming into their life? That's a tough thing. Like, you're not kind of setting yourself up for it all. Like, you've 9 months to set yourself up. You're just kind of
Yeah,
not just handed a baby, but a baby comes into your life and you need to look after him. Like,
yeah.
night feed.
I know. It was just we didn't plan for it. Just it's just the situation arose. Let's just say that where um the situation arose where the child could be going into care, and we were in a position to stop that from happening because children that go into care are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, the homeless services, addiction services. Far too many children of the care system have very poor life outcomes, and we did not want this boy to go into this, to be another one of those statistics. So we took him in with no preparation for it. Now we're looking at doing parenting classes. I think they do parenting classes up in Knocknaheeny. So we'll do that, and we'll do what we can, and we learn as we go, and we get support from um, family, friends, and all these people, So we'll be grand. But yeah, there's big changes. It's very big changes. It's a lot harder than I thought it would be as well.
Yeah.
Such a small man. He demands a lot of attention. He makes a lot of noise.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
but it's no, it's a beautiful thing to be able to give the child an opportunity to have a nice life, and just sort of let the parents kind of come a little bit. I suppose it's just to help the parents to get in a better place where they can actually take the child. So we're minding the child temporarily while the parents continue to work on themselves, and please God, we'd hand them back when they're good and ready. So it's great to be able to do it, but it is challenging. I won't lie.
Another thing has happened there. Your Tommy Tiernan interview was aired again last night in the radio. What kind of feedback did you get from people in terms of, say, people that are struggling with addictions and stuff like that? Will you be able to, did you point them in maybe say the podcast direction and
Yeah,
services? Was it overwhelming this time, or was it just something you took in your stride?
it wasn't half as overwhelming because I suppose I'm a public figure now. I'm used to people contacting me, and I'm used to people knowing me and stuff like that. Let's say. So the first time around, I was so nervous about how people would perceive me. I couldn't enjoy the show. That was only my second time watching it. I watched it when it was on telly originally, and I watched it last night. Last night it was way better. I was over in the hospital with the baby, and I watched it on the laptop, and I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good interview. I thought I spoke well. I represented myself well. Um, and afterwards, then on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and email, I got loads of people contacting me again last night. Not half as many, no, but still an insignificant amount of people. And it's great that we have the podcast because people are a lot of family members of drug users or people suffering with mental health. Family members looking for like, what do I do? I don't understand this. So then I said, you know what? No, just have a look at the podcast, look at the episode, especially with Sharon Lambert one where she explains the roots of addiction and the causes of addiction because people don't understand the behaviors of an addict because it doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean? So there's that, and then um, John Lonergan, the Shield, all the podcasts really, they're all informative and educational. So it was great to have that platform to direct people there and say, have a look at that. And if you liked the interview and you want to learn more or you're interested in the topic, head over to the podcast, So I hope we have new listeners and watchers out of it. If you are, well done.
Great, great.
Yeah, but yeah, it was great to be on the telly last night, get the message out there again. So yeah, and at the same time, then plug the podcast. Have more people contacting me. Got some guests out of it, some potential guests out of it. Mad looking for somebody from the traveller community to come on. I think I have somebody. And we've got good guests lined up as well this week, Tim.
Yeah.
We have a fellow who wrote a book. He suffered with alcoholism. He's in recovery now over a decade. He wrote a book, a well-known book. He'll be on in the next couple of days. We have sex therapist, and not a sex therapist. He's a therapist that specializes in sex addiction. Tim, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. But he's also in recovery, and he'd be able to, like, his experience of the route through recovery into education would be quite similar to yours and maybe mine as well. You know, I know both of we kind of took the psychology, psychotherapy, criminology route,
Mm.
um, but he would have been quite similar to us as well in addiction, and he's going to share his story. And there's other stuff as well he's going to share, but he's going to also talk about sex addiction, the effects of pornography to young kids and stuff like that as well. You
Yeah.
know, and just in general, he's going to just talk about his experience as well, which is very important to people that are listening, because we need a variety of stories, because everybody's story will help different people in different ways, which
Mm.
is critical for the podcast, and which is important, and which is the bread and butter of the podcast. You know,
Yeah.
the whole theory of it. Um, and we have a gambler coming on as well at some stage in the next week. So he's going to come on and talk about the effects of gambling in his own life, his family's life, and how it took over everything. How it took over his thinking, and
Mm.
everything that went on in his life was surrounded, had to be fixed around gambling, you know. So
And we have people with eating disorders coming on as well. We have overeater. We have somebody that suffers with anorexia. Um, so we will touch on everything. We'll get to everything. And the podcast is going nowhere. You know, we're only a young podcast. This is the 20th episode. Speaking of, like, since we're at the 20th episode, Timmy,
mm.
want to give me your maybe your standout podcasts, or maybe a couple of your favorite podcasts, or maybe some of your favorite moments of the podcast we've done so far?
Well, my first two podcasts, they were they were like something you're jumping into the dark. You know, it was
Mm.
like you're jumping into the deep water, and it's like the unknown. You don't know what you're going to find or you're going to hit. You
That
know,
was your first time giving your story in public, like.
it was my first time ever being public about anything, because I was never on social media in my life before that. I was just very private. I kept myself to myself since I came into recovery. You know, and they were a little bit daunting at the beginning. You know, I kind of had to protect myself a little bit, because I didn't know what way people the response is going to be from people, because of some of my experiences with people in addiction. You know,
Mm.
um, so I had to kind of protect myself. You know, that's why we always speak about some guests. We have to be very careful that the guests aren't vulnerable, and the feedback that they get is not bad for them, because it might take them back a step or something to that manner. I had to kind of step back and look at myself and protect myself and feel whatever was going on for me, and kind of stay out of my head, you
Mm.
know, and just kind of remember what the importance of all this is about, you know, uh, because I never done this for anything other than just helping people. You know, there was never any other motive, because I would have been a very private person,
I
you know.
think to
And
me, I think that's very evident, and I think why that the first podcast we done was your first episode, and that has the most views by a good bit. Um, and why that got a huge response is because there was no ego attached to that. That was pure, deep, honest portrayal of your life, and that's what people responded to. It was the same with the Tommy Tiernan show. It was like it was just honesty, you know what I mean? And that's what people want to hear. There was no facade. There was no, oh, I was a mad thing, or I was a gangster, or there was there was none of that. Just this is the way it was, and this is how it is now. And I hope that it can help people. And that's always the motivation, and it has helped a lot of people because you got a lot of people contacting you.
mm. When you're in true recovery, James, in terms of really trying to change yourself, and drop that egotistic personality that you had in addiction. Like that kind of talk doesn't go well with it. It doesn't, like if you're talking like that, it doesn't say too much about the person, you know.
Yeah.
So
And you touched on something there as well to me about protecting guests. I think that's important, like when we're talking to people, we're very conscious. We don't want that person to expose themselves or family members or friends or anything that they may regret afterwards. So we're always very conscious of if something is a bit sensitive, we may stay away from it. Or we don't want to probe people, and that's why it's important to do it in person as well, because you get a feel for somebody if they're comfortable or if they're uncomfortable. And there's all these subtle body movements and body language and energy in the room that you can't pick up on Zoom. So that's why it's important for us to do it in person if we can. And there's been people that have contacted us wanting to come on the podcast with the best of intention now. And they would have making a great podcast. But me and Timmy just felt that it was a bit too soon for them, or they just weren't in the right place at the time. And they might have been great for us and great for the podcast, but aftermath wouldn't have been so good for them. Maybe we just felt that they were a little bit too vulnerable. So we've all that going on too. It's a very person-centered podcast. It's not like get them on tell their story at all costs like some podcasts, and then afterwards they're left with the aftermath of it. We're not into that. You know what I mean? It's not all about clicks and likes and views and subscribes. It's about helping people and not exposing people. So
yeah, yeah. Going back to the
they're your
podcast,
favorite podcasts.
um,
Are your favorite guests? Let's say.
my favorite guests. Um, I enjoyed Lynn. Lynn was a real life energy, you know. She was somebody that I could really relate to because of the younger years, the madness, the chaotic fucking, the dry riding, the robbing, the drugs, and all that stuff, you know. I could, and she was so kind of positive, you know. Every single guest that we had on, I really, really enjoyed because they all had something different to bring to the table, you know. Even like you mentioned Sheila earlier on, like myself and yourself would have had a great relationship with Sheila down through the years. You know, she would have been a massive help with me, James, like in the early days of getting out of prison and stuff like that. She would have got me into education. She would have helped me in different ways in my personal life. I would have got counselling off the Cork Alliance Centre, you know. And just to have somebody there to talk to and just open up to, and it's just to have somebody there, James, you know, who really wants to give you as much help as they can possibly give you, you know. So Sheila would have been a big one, you know. Katrina would have been an emotional one because of the stuff that she has done for my family. Like she would have helped my two brothers in recovery, you know. They were
I
going
think,
through hard.
and the Katrina one, when you were talking about your brother and how Katrina and her organisation helped your brother and that was where I was the most emotional out of all the podcasts, because the tension in the room on that day, I could feel like when you were talking about your brother and how hopeless he was and how he's a shining light at the moment. There was a fierce energy in the room at the time, and it was a very emotional podcast. Let's just say that, and people picked up on that at home too. Like,
Yeah, definitely. You know, and even when my mother was alive, like anybody who's heard my story knows the situation with my mother, you know, and mental health and suicide and stuff like that, you know. But my mother would have worked in the kitchens of penny dinners once upon a time as well, like, and that's where that kind of relationship comes from, you know, her knowing my mother and knowing us through my mother, and then when my mother died, her trying to help us out, you know, and I think they do a fantastic job inside there feeding and caring for a lot of the homeless in Cork City. But outside of all that, they're known for that side of it. But there's other stuff that goes on there then too, like, you know, helping young people, just giving them something to do, you know, because anybody that's in early recovery, James, like boredom is the number one killer. The one number one thing that brings people back into addiction, you know.
yeah,
And what they do is they help people in there in terms of giving them something to do, may it be working in the kitchen or going out on the bike and with the lads and feeding the homeless, you know. all that stuff is critical. Like, and you know that, and I know it. You have to be busy.
Yeah.
So, you know, Mikey was a good guest. I enjoyed listening to Mikey. You know, Mikey's story there for a young person. Connor, another fantastic guest. You know, I look at them young fellas and I see my potentially young self. If you know,
So they were so mature for their age to me one day.
unbelievably, and they're getting maturer and stronger because even coming on a podcast, and I know they do a lot of their own social media stuff, and Connor's been on a show on RTE, you know, all that stuff is helping them grow, helping them with their self-esteem, their confidence, you know.
And they're
That's
carrying the message as well, like.
it's amazing, like, and they'll go on into schools, both of them, I'm sure,
Yeah.
and they will talk about their experience in life, and excuse me, and what has helped them to develop into the people they are now today. You know, like I obviously, as Timmy was never ready to get what any of that stuff at a young age. I had to go through all my own shit to become the person I am today, and to when I got into recovery, I think I was 31. You know, this December now I'll be the 26th of this December. I'll be 9 years away from everything, alcohol, drugs, and gambling, and all that other fucking
And
shit that
so,
comes with it. You know, the crime and all that mad stuff. You know, but it's been a slow process as well. The the growing process, because when I did put down the drink and drugs like James, I was left with my thinking, because my thinking wasn't occupied with drinking, drugs, and gambling and all that other stuff anymore. I was left with all the emotional stuff of my past, the trauma, the fear, the shame, the guilt, all the stuff I would have done in addiction, all the violence, all that stuff. You're left with all that, and you have to deal with that, right? But if you have to deal with that and you don't know how to deal with it, and you're full of all these different emotions that you don't know what they are, and feelings, and being in prison as well while all this is going on, and you're in a cell on your own and you just no one to talk to, you know, and you're in the prison environment as well where there's a lot of drugs and alcohol and whatever else.
mm,
It was a really difficult time, you know. I managed to keep pushing. Educate. That's where education played a key role for me, because it kept me occupied, it kept me busy, you know. And it was, you know, they were tough times, but I had to go through all that stuff by to be where I am, the good place I am today, and I keep reiterating this, and I think it's relevant. It's for me, it's all about the sitting with yourself in that peace, that moment, and just feeling whatever's going on for you. And meditation was the key for me, like, because there was no other way. There was absolutely no other way, because I mentioned this before. I could not retain any information that was given to me because I was in survival mode, and when you're in survival mode, it's impossible to retain information because you're high up in your better brainwave frequencies, and you're up in your third level where you're just fight or flight, you know, and that's
mm,
where I lived most of my life, because I was constantly trying to protect myself, thinking that there was always somebody out for me. There was never a good reason for any contact with people. It was always, oh, they want something because, you know. But it's different now, because I've gotten to know people for how they are, and I've met some great people in my life, and it's just a
yeah.
fantastic life today, James. You know what I
And
mean?
the change started if you're in prison, and we've been in contact with certain people from Weefield Prison and Cork Prison about showing the podcast to prisoners. But I'd love if we could get it into all the prisons, you know, like put it on a, like I know since the prisons, since the coronavirus, a lot, I don't know if all the prisons, but a lot of the prisons have Netflix and stuff in the cells because they've no visits and stuff, and the school might be closed and stuff. So it'd be fairly easy for them to stream the podcast to the cells. You know, I think it'd be very beneficial for people because you can plant the seed, or you can start the process in prison. Do you know what I mean? It's a safe environment to do it for the most part. So it'd be great if we can get the podcast in the prison. I don't know if any prison governor watches this, but I'd love to do a live podcast in the prison. in any prison. If anyone wants us to go to their prison and do a live podcast, that would be like amazing. And then outside of that, I suppose we're still waiting to go up to the president and me. Yeah, we were supposed to go to the Arsenal Duran. We got an invitation from Michael D. Higgins inviting us up for lunch. But
Do you want to talk about how we actually met him the first time? Like people are saying, how did how did the president get onto the two of the boys? You know, like
yeah, the reason that came about was because when I was on the Tommy Tiernan show in January, he watched it and he asked Tommy Tiernan for my contact details. So I got a phone call there last February from Tommy Tiernan's crew saying, "Oh, there's somebody looking for your contact details. Is it okay to give them out?" And I said, "Who is it?" And they said, "President Higgins." And I was like, "I'll tell him, no, go in, don't be annoying me." And I was like, "Fucking course, you can give him my details, you know."
but
So
we tell him about the time we met him initially, like we were doing like
yeah,
bit of a
we both
conference.
we both spoke at a conference, at Cork Alliance Centre conference. So it's a conference around assistance and offending and reintegration, all these things. And if you look behind Timmy, you can actually see the photographs of us with the president.
Yeah.
So we met him in 2014.
I don't know, can you see anything? Do you know?
Yeah, yeah,
See anything?
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, terribly nice man.
yeah,
You know, but the whole point of the conference was um, we had a lot of different organisations from around the country, like we had prison services, probation services, and we had to give our stories on the stage inside the Fortin Crane, which is like a theatre in Cork. And the whole point of it was for us to show these people and organisations that change can happen.
mm,
You know, and it was we were there to actually show them that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that it's not always a bad story or a bad ending, you know. And from that conference, a lot of those people that were in the audience, probation officers, um, governors, chiefs of prisons, people from the IPS, the Irish Prison Service, their view was their perception of everything was changed because of that
yeah.
conference, you know.
That's how the myself and Sheila. Then after that, we were up training recruit prison officers. That's how that came about then, because the chief, Ray O'Keefe, that was in charge of the prison training college, he was in the audience at the time. He heard us speaking. He was like, "We should get the lads up to speak to the recruit prison officers." So that's how that came about. And it was a great conference. And there was Sheila from the Cork Lions. She was organising another conference there, but COVID screwed that up again. So maybe we'll do that next year. The conference happens every couple of years, you know.
Mm.
In terms of the guests, then again, I suppose a couple of the ones that stand out for me was it was great to have Sheila on, because obviously we're very close to Sheila and it meant a lot for us to have her on. Um, then I enjoyed John Lonigan, because I just thought it was great that John Lonigan, 70-odd-year-old man, would drive down to Churchfield Green to us. Do you know what I mean? I,
Mm.
I just felt there was humility to that. Plus, we shared a lot of similar views, and the content of the podcast was good. Then Philly McMahon was a great podcast, because we drove up to Philly and I was kind of nervous about meeting Philly, because he's a GA superstar. He's very famous. He's got fucking about 100 all the medals, club and county. And I was like, is he going to be what ego? Do you know, some of these sports stars can be full of ego and you're going to think he's this and that. But he was the most down to earth man. He was so humble and he was just like one of us. And he made us feel very welcome. And I thought that was a great podcast as well. That was the last podcast in season 1. But I think my favourite one was the Sharon Lambert one, because there was just a great dynamic between the three of us at the time. And it went for about 45 minutes, but we could have went much longer. There's so much to cover with Sharon, because she's just so intelligent. And I suppose after that, we said we have to do another one. So Sharon is going to do a live podcast with us in the Everyman.
Yeah.
She's one of the guests, and the format is going to be slightly different. she might interview or dissect us up on stage. So that'll be interesting, and we can have 100 guests in the Everyman. So I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, but as I said, they're all great guests. You know, the Lynn one was great because she's kind of half mad and she fitted in well with us. Um, and and then the not so famous ones, the Nicole Ryan speaking about her brother, I felt that was powerful. And everybody, you know, they're all great
Every
episodes.
guest, every
Yeah,
guest that came on was powerful. You know, everybody had to face some fear to come on that. You know, I know from my own experience, I was fucking shit myself. You know, basically because you don't know where people are going to react. Yeah, so we could
yeah,
understand how everybody felt coming on. You know, the podcast, especially because it's visual as well, James. You know, and you're going to be
yeah,
on YouTube.
yeah.
You know, so everybody was. I could name every single person there that was on the podcast in the last 20, is it 17
Yeah.
or 18 episodes, and every one of them had brought something very special to the podcast. So, like, if there's somebody that we're not saying,
No
mentioning here,
offense.
like, it doesn't make any difference. It's just, you know, like, Mark and Shane, the two lads talking about fitness, they were
Yeah,
fantastic. You
yeah,
know, Jesus Christ, my mind has gone blank now.
no,
But everybody was fucking brilliant. I
everyone,
enjoyed
yeah.
every single one of them. You know.
And we'd like to hear what you think. What was your favorite episodes? You know, put it into the comment section here. And if you're on YouTube or if you're on Spotify, you can tweet us or email us, whatever. If you think that there's some topics that we haven't covered or haven't said we're going to cover that you'd like us to cover, a lot of covers there. But let us know. Get in touch. Comment on some of the stuff that you want us to touch on. Also coming up, we have a couple of comedians. So we'll bring a bit of humor again to it because I know it can be quite intense and quite serious. And I hope that we have to make it digestible, and it can't be all too serious and too traumatic either. Do you know what I mean? So we've got some humorous people coming on soon, and we might do no Christmas special as well. Timmy, maybe do a live stream one and uh, interactive with the guests, or the audience can ask us questions in real time. So we'll definitely do something like that, and maybe do some prizes or something. You know, a dinner with the Two Norries or something like that.
Ah, yeah. No chipper. We go up the
Chipper,
burgers. We
yeah,
call it the old bag of food.
a breast in the bun with the Two Norries.
I know.
But look, we'll be back to you this time next week. We'll have a new podcast. It will be in person. It'll be back to normal. Fuck you, COVID, and the 6 weeks killed us all. But please God, we get back to normal, and we're going to house into a proper podcast. So we see you all next week. Good night, Tim.
Thanks everyone.
See you
Thanks for
later.
the support. Everyone's support, and hopefully everything will be back to normal in the next few weeks, and we can all enjoy Christmas. You know. So God bless everyone.